Here we are. This is a panel on paddles on the water, and we're calling it a deep dive into Portland's paddling culture. We have a lot of longtime paddlers on this meeting and our presentation, who, if you've seen the movie, they're all in the movie as well. Yeah, we're just going to talk about a little bit about the movie, talk about paddling, our favorite topic, and Wasabi, our club, that paddling club that we all belong to, and yeah, just kind of get into it. So I'll start off by introducing myself, and then everyone else can chime in with their introduction. And I just wanted to start off with how long you've been paddling for, and what was the first team that you started paddling with. So I'm Austyn. I'm the producer, director, editor, filmer, kind of creator of the movie Paddles on the Water, which was a passion project of mine for about 5 years. And I've been paddling since 2017, which is when I started making the movie, so it kind of coincided. And Wasabi was my first club, my first dragon boat club that I was on. So, Vassar, why don't you go ahead?
I'm Vassar Bird, and I've been paddling for 16 years. It was funny to think back. I started paddling knowing nothing at all about how to do it for the Holiday Park Plaza Pirates. I started that team, and over time I had another corporate team after that, and then joined the real team, Wasabi, and actually learned how to paddle.
Connie, you want to go ahead?
Sure, I'm Connie. I've been paddling forever, since 1992. Started with Wasabi, which was actually Abracazam for 1 year until we became Wasabi, because Abracazam was the name of the company that sponsored us, and it was a t-shirt making company. And they got the contract for Rose Festival, so they didn't think they should just have one team. So they said, can't use your name anymore. So our founder and his cousin were eating sushi, and hence the reason that, and Wasabi is hot, which they felt like we were. So that is how I came to the sport.
Cool. And if you watch the film, that story is also part of the beginning of it, so it's a great story. Carol, take it away.
I'm Carol Hoekstra, and I started paddling about 23 years ago. So I started with a team called Dragon's Breath International. Apparently they had been Dragon's Breath until they decided to go race in Canada, and then they had to call themselves Dragon's Breath International. But yeah, it was I started as a newbie, and kind of that was a club that had actually started grown enough to have 2 teams, and so they had their advanced team, and then they had their novice team. And I joined the novice team, so I always had that little thing to look up to, like, ooh, I want to be like them. Got to know some paddlers, got to know some people from Wasabi, and I joined Wasabi maybe 2 years later. So
yeah, it's funny because I just joined Wasabi right away, and which is I mean, if you're in the paddling community, that'll mean something to you. But basically, Wasabi is one of the most competitive teams in Portland, as far as I understand. It's we compete at a really high level, and when we can, we go to international competitions. And I had never dragon boated before. I was always an athletic person, but I had never been in a dragon boat. So when I joined Wasabi, everybody was like, "Hey, we're gonna go to Hungary and compete in this world championship." And I was like, "Okay." That I think it was like my second practice or something that I had ever been in a dragon boat, and I was like, "Okay, let's do this. It sounds fun." So yeah, I just kind of got thrown into the deep end and never turned back. Cool. So it looks like we have Cindy and Bren on now. So Cindy, Bren, we're just introducing ourselves and talking about the first dragon boat team that we were on and how long we've been paddling for. That's kind of how we're kicking this off. So Cindy, you wanna go for it? You got to unmute, honey. You're on mute. There you go.
How's that? So I started dragon boating on the Kaohsiung boats, which are Portland. I don't know who we're speaking to, but Portland, Oregon has a Rose Festival. And we have these big ornate boats that were given to us for these festivals from Kaohsiung, China, which is Portland's sister city. And so I started about 20 years ago with a team called the Mothership, all moms with kids going to the same grade school. And I started right off steering because we were all brand new, and the folks that taught us just said, "Hey, somebody's got to learn how to steer this thing." And so I went, "Oh, I'll do it." So the first 5 years that I was a dragon boater, I was just strictly steering. And then I started paddling. And then when I switched over to Wasabi, in about 2008, I think it was, I went to paddle, but then I also started steering. And about 5 years ago, I got diagnosed with a kind of a nasty vascular disease. And one of the things that Austyn has made reference to about paddling, dragon boat paddling, is that people in all sorts of situations, health-wise, can participate. And what it did for me was it forced me out of the paddle bench and into the calling bench, which is where you sit up front and call out to the paddlers what to do. But primarily, it put me back in the steering oar, where I've just had the opportunity to steer with Wasabi in some international races and had some really fun times doing that. So it was really nice for me to maintain that opportunity to stay with my crew and my team, but just not in a paddle bench, which was really hard and sometimes still is. But it's also really neat to steer and to guide the crew just in a different way.
Yeah, so for people who don't know, paddling, dragon boats don't have a rudder. So we have a person with and Vassar explains this in the film. There's somebody with a big stick in the back who's steering the boat.
Right.
Yeah. Now my printer is going to start working. So Hickman, Cindy Hickman is one of our most experienced steers people, and her husband Mark also is one of our best steers people. So sometimes we'll have Cindy in the front calling and Mark in the back steering, and we call it the Hickman sandwich.
Right. Mom and Dad try not to fight while we have the little children in the middle watching us carefully.
It's very sweet, though. Very romantic. It looks like we have Bren on, I think.
Yep, I'm here.
Cool, Bren's here. So Bren, can you just introduce yourself and tell us how long you've been paddling for and what was the first team that you started paddling with? Bren, you're still on mute.
It's so funny. I totally hit unmute. Okay. So I've been paddling for 22 years this January. I started on a rec team called Red Dragons that morphed to Sirens at some point not long after. After that, I mean, so in Portland, there is a whole other group of paddlers that paddle under the Pacific, what's it called? How do we call that one? No. So there's a whole, it's been a long time since I've been on that side of the river, as we call it. So there's a whole other set of boats that paddle, not the Kaohsiung, but the other just kind of regular dragon boats, that there are at least 25 teams over there on that side. And they paddle in a lot of the same races that we paddle in, or that Wasabi paddles in. So that's where I started. I moved to a mixed team at some point, and paddled with Kaikaika. When I was with Kaikaika, I started doing outrigger, which is a kind of another version of a water sport that we have here in Portland. And then when I was on Kaikaika, I started paddling with Wasabi, in that a mixed team could sometimes, if they had extra, some of the women could also then paddle with a women's team. And so I started paddling with Wasabi. And then at some point in that process, I was asked to come help assistant coach, co-coach the Wasabi huge team, and then transferred over and have now been with Wasabi for 7 years, I think I did. I don't know if I'm right. Pretty close to that. And I've been both doing coaching dragon boat as well as paddling outrigger.
So Bren is the head coach of the women's program, which is Wasabi Women's Program. So Wasabi has kind of different groups. It's a club that there's upwards of, I don't know, 300 members or something like that. And so we have kind of different teams within the club, and women's program is the one that I'm on, that we're all on, and Bren is the head coach. Carol and Connie are both assistant coaches, right? Is that's the title? Although they're, all like super experienced, amazing paddlers. That's kind of
Cindy too.
Cindy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, I think that one thing that is really interesting to a lot of people about dragon boat paddling is just the kind of the age range that, of people that are able to paddle. And as Cindy brought up, people with different physical limitations, and how you can kind of train through all these things. Our team in particular, we range from age 30 to over 70, and we all paddle together. So that's one thing that that I know a lot of people are interested in with the sport, and something that really drew me to the story was just that fact that we can all, that we're all, that I'm paddling behind a 70-year-old, and, getting energy from that person, and, just feeling like we're in this together. So that's something I kind of wanted to talk about.
I just want to jump in because of the my introduction to Wasabi after being on 2 of those Rose Festival teams and thinking like, I've kind of got this. And they stuck me and my friend in the back of the boat of a breast cancer survivor team, SOAR. And just so happened that the second half of that boat, all of those women had white hair. And so I don't know anything about anything. And I sit in the back of this boat and we go out and we can warm up. And I just remember the end of the warm up, my friend Erin and I were having a hard time breathing. And the women in front of us turned around and said, "Are you all right, dear?" And it was we're just cracked up because they were decades older, breast cancer survivors kicking our butts. And I just thought it's a perfect, whenever I think about paddling, it's a perfect way to think of how fit you can be, no matter where you come from. And you're always improving. And also that they were nice to us.
Yeah, and for me, it was so inspiring, to feel like, oh, you can push through anything, and get to that level. So
Well, and I think all of us that have had the opportunity to coach, and I talk about it all over the places I get to teach and work, is accessibility. I mean, the sport is readily accessible to anyone who wants to participate. Now, when you get to the level that Bren and Carol and Vassar and Cindy and Austyn have gotten to, there's a little bit, it's different if you choose to go there. But in terms of the ability to get in a boat and get that energy that Austyn's talking about, there's no one that we can't teach to paddle. There just isn't. There's a way we can make it work. And I think that really makes the sport unique in that, say, white-haired people and breast cancer survivors.
Well, and not to leave out, there's all kinds of adaptive paddling now at the national level and stuff. There are a lot of teams out there with visual impairments. So there's a lot that a team can get you through, I think, as well as what paddling that you can approach as a paddler and become a paddler doing. Yeah, I don't know if I'm expressing it well, but I think that we all, part of the reason we're all here too is that community thing. Even those little white-haired people saying, turning to you, Vassar, and saying, "Are you okay, dear?" But just the community that you get out there is also part of what makes it so accessible.
Yeah. Bren or Cindy, do you guys want to chime in on that at all?
I always chuckle because in the same way that Vassar has kind of that comment around being winded and sitting behind those folks is I also think about that, when I started paddling, I was in my 30s and in my late 20s. And so when I think about myself as I age, just an honest, that I saw this and was like, oh, I'm not regulated to not being healthy and not being active as I get older in my life. But that was really all I saw growing up. And so for me, showing up to the sport and then meeting all of these people who are still being active in a sport into their 70s was absolutely mind-blowing and definitely changed my kind of outlook on what I thought was possible for myself and for my own body. So it was an eye-opener for sure.
Yeah, one thing I think somebody was talking about this the other day, just about how, they were on an older dragon boat team, and one of the most important things with paddling is unison and paddling together. And of course, we try to get as much strength as we can out of every stroke, and we try to find different ways to get power and stuff like that. But I think that, one of the things that makes it so accessible is that it's all about like doing it together. And if you can get that, that rhythm and like in and out together, it's like, that's almost like more important, I think, than any other element of it.
So Austyn, one of the things is Cindy here. One of the things to speak to that, the age factor and all the other things that can sideline folks that I find very inspirational and encouraging is that when you can sit in the dragon boat and particularly with the women's program, and because that's the one I'm most familiar with, I can only assume that other programs are like this. You can look around you, and it's not only an age thing that you'll see a differential in. It's it's people that have had all sorts of roadblocks to physical activity and physical competition at a higher level, whether that's shoulder, new shoulders and new hips and any kind of not just cancer, but that is included. And I think what I gained and gleaned from these the resilience. So it's unique. Certainly is found on the women's program in Wasabi Paddling Club. And in right now what we're going through, I think it's with this pandemic, it's an attribute that it's been critically needed. And you look around and who you're sitting next to or paddling next to, and the things that they have overcome, if you will, to be sitting there and competing at that high level is quite extraordinary. It's very inspirational. I don't, that's a rough word but it certainly shows you what resiliency looks like and that it's available to you.
Yeah, and right now we're kind of building back up. We were off the boat for about a year because of COVID, and so we're kind of going through a revival right now, as I know that everyone in the world is. We have a fair amount of new paddlers that are coming into the boat, and one thing that Connie talks about is how Wasabi is always kind of changing and morphing, and it's a club that's been around since the early 90s, and it's gone through a lot of different phases. And I feel like right now, we're kind of going through another one, starting up again. So yeah, do any of you guys have anything to add about that? Just kind of like the revival of our sport at this moment in time.
I think maybe not the revival, but just I must be the person speaking for community today, because again, that same thing, coming out of shutdown and coming out of the pandemic and being able to get back to being outside together with a fabulous group of people has been a lot. Okay, I'm gonna sound very poetic. It's been a light. Like, I started working from home, working remotely, and my world went shrink during COVID's worst, right? And I think that happened for a lot of people. And then getting back out to doing paddling has been really invigorating. It's really helped make life feel more full again. And I think I always knew I enjoyed the community and all that, and it was a great group of friends, but I think that I really learned even more to value it from coming through the pandemic and coming back to this.
I would also say that paddling is so flexible because there's so many different ways to get on the water. And so for most of that 16 years, I was a pretty serious dragon boater. And then more recently, for fun, initially, I started doing outrigger canoe, which is a different type of on-water sport with no motor. Fewer people involved. There's 6-man boats, there's 2-man boats, and there's 1-man boats. And I did it for fun. And then I found myself last summer, because of the pandemic, actually buying an OC1 of my own. And I can go out every single day on the river now in a way that I never thought I would ever do. And that's all through Wasabi and through the power of just having people around you who have all different ways of taking care of themselves on the water. It's more than just exercise. It's meditation as well.
We are so gifted in Portland with a place to paddle that is so exceptional. And Austyn's movie does such a great job of highlighting how, we have the city lights at night. We have eagles on the island. We have deer that swim in the river. We have the ducks that come by because, we feed them.
Don't forget Walter.
And we have Walter, and eagles, and it's just an exceptional place. And I'm with Vassar during the pandemic. I did a lot more the first summer, a lot more OC1 paddling, and because we could go out at the same time as other people. And I know Austyn's done that quite a bit. Not be together because we couldn't be together, but we could be out there at the same time and enjoy the energy. But I also want to really highlight what Carol said, getting back in the boat and feeling that community and people are so excited to just be together and see each other again and work to that common goal, which is, really the heart of dragon boating. As Austyn said, you have to do it together. And that really common goal piece was just, the energy level is just remarkable. And I'm with you, Carol. What a nice thing to feed into. And certainly, fingers crossed, everything is pointing to us being able to go back to some competitions that are safe for us to attend, and find all those friendships and whatnot, and the high of competing well at your best again. And we will look forward to that. But just being together is such a gift.
It's funny, so I'm both paddler and coach, so I make sure that I get water time as well. So it's an important part for me to feel like a part of the team and not just the parent or the coach of the team. So trying to make sure that folks had that opportunity. And one of the things that Wasabi does have, they don't have a ton, but we have some, which is great, is that the opportunity for folks who don't own their own boat, which can be really expensive. We have a handful of boats that paddlers can use if they've, done some training on it first. And so that summer we were able to use those boats as well for folks who didn't have them. And, we did Zoom workouts, but they just weren't the same, right? So this feeling, I remember the first few times we got on the water, maybe the first time I even held a paddle, because I think the first few times I coached, I remember that feeling of just oh yeah, this is what it is. This is what I missed. Outrigger is great, and I loved doing it, and I did it the entire time we were not allowed on the dragon boats. But there was something about being in the boat with maybe not all 20 of us, because we were trying to keep it a little bit more spaced out, but just the feeling of the boat moving together is so different, and it's so uplifting. And I know Austyn points out that says that I having to do it together. The reality is that you can't do it by yourself. So if you think you can get on that boat and you're like, yes, I'm in this boat by myself, well, that's not really going to work, and it's never going to feel good. So you really are on this boat with 21 other people when you include the steers person and the person calling. And you have that feeling of doing it together is so, it's like that athlete high moment, right? That moment when it just feels right. And as much as you can get that on a boat by yourself, sure. I feel it more when I'm on a dragon boat with many other people. So I've really enjoyed watching everybody and watching the smiles and the excitement of getting back on the water as a larger crew. And then, now we're at the place where, as Connie was kind of talking about, things are starting to open up, and we're going to have to start thinking about what we want to do next. This crew specifically, or this program specifically, we have a bit of an orientation focus, so we want to look for something to do. So a race to go to, what size it is, a race to go to is kind of an important thing to train for. As social as we are, I think this group really does well when we have something to focus on. And so that will be the next steps for this group at some point soon, to start discussing what is next and what we want to work on. But we don't do this in a vacuum. We make sure that all of the paddlers get to have a say.
Cool. Yeah. And just to kind of give some context, pre-COVID, we had qualified to go to a world championship race in France, in Aix-les-Bains, which is this incredibly picturesque spa town in northern France. So we were all super pumped about that, and we were kind of we had just competed at nationals in Colorado Springs, and then the previous year in Hungary, which is where all the footage in the film was shot. So we were kind of really fine-tuned as a crew, I think. And so I think for me, at least, when COVID hit, it was like Carol said, it's everything shrunk down. Things were so exciting at that, for us as a crew, I think, at that moment. And we were all just feeling really good together. So, but yeah, luckily we were able to switch over to outriggers, and we actually trained through COVID and which culminated for 12 of us paddlers in a 26-mile marathon, which was an epic journey down the river. But yeah, I guess maybe it would be cool to talk a little bit about world competition, like what it's like to train, a group our size, and kind of prepare for that level of competition. Does that sound like a good topic? Maybe we could start off with one of the coaches.
I think we're all like, okay, who's going to take it first?
I guess, yeah. It's right. Or like trying to put my thoughts together on that. It takes a lot to put your thoughts together about this.
Yes,
and I think that's really where it starts. It starts with this: what is possible? How much am I willing to do? How many people do we actually have? What are their ages? And who's going to be willing to train for it? So I kind of start with that. I'll be honest, like that's kind of the start. And it includes having a conversation with all of the coaches in this group. And so that all starts the kind of mulling, for a good way to put it. While that kind of mulling is happening, every year, I put out a season packet, and it basically says, here's what you're expected to do over the winter. Here's the time trials that you're going to have to do to make the boat, if that's what your goal is. If that's not your goal, we still need you there as a paddler. We still want you there, and we want you to be a part. We want you to work hard over the winter, because there is a thing, just stopping it. So this has been hard. If you didn't do a lot of working out over the winter and you showed up in February and got on the boat and we started working hard, your body might not be ready. So that's part of it, is making sure that people are staying active through the winter. We could paddle in the winter. No one really likes it. It's cold, it's wet. We have to cancel a lot of them. So we ask you to do stuff at home or indoors. So we have something called an erg, or a rowing machine time trial, that we have to do. You got 500 meters. How fast can you do it? And then there's usually what's called another type of time trial, and this one's on water, and that is an OC1 that we put in Lake Vancouver, and you would go about 380 meters to 400, sometimes 300, just depends on what the course looks like that year. And again, how fast can you do it? The other factors that I love about choosing or how you get chosen for a boat is around, like, are you a good teammate? Do you show up for practice? Do you consistently work hard at practice? Are you willing to be trained? So those are the gray ones, sure. So those all kind of start to happen. And then we start training. And the coaches sit down and write a training plan leading up to that race. What I will say about Wasabi and the women's program specifically is that, to my knowledge, from the history that I've been able to find, we're the only club to have taken all 4 women's divisions at the same time. So when we went to Hungary, we took a premier boat, so that's all ages. We took senior A, so that's 40 plus, senior B, which is 50 plus, and a senior C, which is 60 plus. That's a lot of people. I'm just gonna be really, really honest. That's a lot of people. So if you imagine that, yes, so that's part of that discussion about, do we have enough? Are they training hard enough? We, as a coaching group, and kind of in my belief as well, this is a high level of competition within a club, which means I know you have a life, you have kids, you have a job, you have a house you have to take care of. You might have a partner that you have to take care of, it, like be around for as well. Although we do joke and we talk about this, maybe a section of time where you're not spending a ton of time with your partner because you got to focus on this other thing. So I don't require weigh-ins per se. I don't require giving me your food diary. I don't need to know every single thing you're doing. And in honesty, when we go to those international races, because we don't do it at that level that I was just saying, we are aiming for top of the like second group. But you know what? I don't mind taking like 5th in the world. There's nothing wrong with saying that. That's still got a pretty good ring to it. Or even 8th in the world, which is the next top. So I guess that I love doing it also for the experience. So someone like Austyn, who's never done anything like this, gets to go to Hungary, so to a whole other country and race against all these people from around everywhere who did the same kind of thing as we did. They trained, they worked hard, they won their berth, they got to go. And I think there is an importance to doing that, and an importance to knowing that this dragon boating is so big around the world. And that's one of your chances to get to see it.
Connie, I saw you unmuted yourself. Did you want to say something about that?
I mean, just to build kind of on where Bren has gone with the choices that people are in our sport are able to make about what their commitment level is, and still be participatory in sending a team. Let's say I couldn't make the cuts or couldn't make the commitment to make a team for Hungary. I was still really important because every time a practice boat went out, it needed to be full. So the people training for Hungary could feel what it was to move a boat that was full of paddlers and that had that kind of weight to it and that kind of energy level in it. Cindy's steering needed to feel how that was going to feel. So even if I'm not able or willing to train to the level that Bren was talking about, doesn't make me any less of an important part of the team. I am just as important. I am on the medal stand with them in Hungary, just as if I went, because that's what it takes to move that kind of huge group like we took to Hungary forward to being successful within that international community. So I just wanted to kind of build on that piece.
And from a paddling perspective, what I really always appreciated in all of the different coaching regimes that I've been under in Wasabi is how well they've communicated those goals. So that as a paddler, I have to make a decision every year. And I know, when is it happening? What's the requirement? When do we have to show up? How long do we have to be there? Because you're not just showing up, on the day of the race. What's the cost? Because we pretty much pay for our own stuff. And I know that a year in advance, almost a year in advance. And so you can start to figure out, is this a year you have to take a pass? And I've gone to almost everything, but I missed Macau because no money, family commitments, all that stuff. And that's okay. And as Connie was saying, what I really liked about that was being in the boat that you were racing against the people that were going to, because you're trying your best to make it hard because they're carrying your Wasabi honor forward and you want them to be tough. But that said, I would say going to race internationally is so much fun. It is such a high. And seeing another country as a member of a team is a different way to see that country. You'll never get those opportunities as an individual traveler. And so super cool. And of course, running across other team members multiple times in multiple years from Poland or, all over the world is it's just really cool. It makes you feel like a rock star.
Yeah, I think I remember when I interviewed you, Vassar, you talked about like a competition in Florida or something where everybody was like chanting USA and you felt like a rock star. Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the coolest things about the sport too is that it, the group energy just kind of builds, and it's like before you know it, you've like done this amazing, huge feat that you never could imagine you would have been able to do, but it's like it becomes like your family, your teammates just kind of get excited, and it just like this momentum builds. And yeah, then like you're just like racing against the world. It's a pretty, I think it's a unique element of the sport. And also not just on your team, but when I went to Hungary, like I felt that from the community of dragon boating. It's a very, because it's such an interwoven sport, I think that kind of extends to the people that are in it. You kind of get that sense from everyone. Cool. So what else should we talk about? Let's see. Brent, I mean, one thing that I think is an interesting topic is gender identity in our sport. Like every sport, it's kind of separated into men and women. And so I kind of wanted to get into a little bit about the issues surrounding, gender identity at this point, and at this level of competition that we go into.
I will say that as a community, so within the smaller community of paddling, so when I say community, I would say like the Pacific Northwest. California has kind of their own section that we could go to as well, but like if I think about the Pacific Northwest, and I think about the races that are held in our communities, so in our towns, those races are all under the belief that you race as who you want to be and who you are, and they're not going to question it. If you registered as on a mixed team, so a mixed team has supposed to have half men and half women. You can have more women, you can't have more men. Technically on the boat. If I came to a race and I chose, and before as a roster, so the roster being turned in, I was going to race as a guy, that wouldn't be questioned. It's just what it is. There's no questioning it. And the race officials and the people putting on the race have been trained by me actually not to do that. They need to make sure that they are making sure they're not questioning it. They're not, they're going to advocate for the paddlers. So I've been working with coaches and with race officials about how to run local races, because local races, they're important and they're fun. They're not about taking a pee in a cup to see whether or not whatever gender I match, or to make sure I'm not taking steroids. That's not what local racing's about. It's about having fun. It's about competition, but it's about having fun. When you get to the bigger competitions, so nationals or worlds, we follow the WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency's rules, and the International Olympic Committee rules. So we have to follow the same rules that they've put forth, which means that you have to, this is where sport is really obvious. This is that discussion I get to have almost every year, that sports are really, the history of sports for women is filled with lots of issues where women thought there was a long time when women couldn't play sports, right? They thought it would hurt them and make it so they couldn't have babies anymore. And all of these things that we thought we have to protect the women. So in that process, the interesting switch, or not interesting, the really frustrating part with this is, if I was a person who was in the process of transitioning from female to male, there are no rules about how much testosterone or estrogen I have in my body. There's no rules. You can just paddle as a guy. Now, if I was transitioning from male to female, there's rules about how much hormone I'm allowed to, how much I have to have lived with estrogen for 2 years fully, completely transitioned in that way before I would be allowed to paddle at the national or international level as a female. The other thing that kind of gets hard with this, and this is kind of, we saw this recently in the Olympics, is if I was born intersex or just a female that had more testosterone in their system, I could potentially disqualify my team if I didn't know that. I could potentially, I could make it so the team gets disqualified if I didn't know, because there's actually a limit as to how much testosterone I'm allowed to have in my system. And it's without taking any. That's not saying I'm taking it. It's the like just what's in my natural system. So it gets confusing and it gets overwhelming. And I think what I really, really push for is that as a coach and as a peer as your teammate, that your job is to advocate for your teammate and for your paddler. They're not the ones who have to convince someone of who they are. It's not their job to convince another team's coach who they are. If that paddler comes to you and says these things, that's who they are. And you need to go there, and you need to be able to support them and protect them in some way and advocate for them. It has happened in recent histories where this has not happened very well, which is why I think this is really important that as a community, we support paddlers for who they are. And we talk about it all the time about the inclusion, and we talk about it being open, and it is. And there are still struggles like in any sport. It's not perfect. And I think that it's our job to continually work on making it a little bit better.
And Austyn, I would add to that, kind of hearkening back to one of the things Bren said at the beginning of that piece, is there's also the age piece. So when I entered paddling, which was a very long time ago, women weren't allowed to race as women's teams past 500 meters. That was it. The dudes could do it, but the girls couldn't do it. So I was actually coaching an international team. Goodness sakes, I don't know, maybe Carol will remember where we were. I can't even remember that, Carol. And I went to the race officials and I said, my team would like to race the 2000. We understand that there's no division for us and we're not going to win anything. That's okay. We just want to do it. We think it's fun, and I'll tell you, they can do it. So we raced in the 2000 with the dudes because that was where they had room. Now, I can't remember if we beat any. I don't really care. But that advocacy in my, and get to my age, because I'm a C, that piece is big. It's big for women. It's to say we are an athlete in exactly the same way as a male athlete, and we can perform at the level that we're up to and give us the chance to do it. So I think, like Bren said, you advocate for your paddlers. And in my case, I've advocated for the female paddling community and the age community, maybe a little in a way similar to the way Bren is talking about advocating for the gender identity community. And that it's something I'm proud of doing. And I feel like it's part of the legacy I will leave when I leave the community.
If
I don't remember which competition that was. I'm trying to search back, but yeah, that I think one, I also want to thank Bren for the advocacy that they've been doing and the training that they've been doing to kind of help us get to another level with understanding gender identities and how to behave appropriately. And I think there's another legacy that most of our sports have that we all kind of have to think about a little, is that the idea has somehow been out there that to race in the men's categories, to race up, and to race in the women's categories, to race down, and this whole kind of bifurcation of the qualifications to get on to either one of those levels. Something that we all kind of have to check our all like inherited bias on to make sure that we understand that that's really not the way it really is. So. Cindy, I think you were going to say something.
I was going to just jump in on the advocacy things. There are times when we need to and happily advocate for our teammates as coaches and each other. And Connie and I, a couple of years ago, were racing in a race down in Trinidad and Tobago. We were racing on a 10-person boat instead of the 20. And we were in the open ocean. And as I recall, Connie, correct me if I'm wrong, the chop started to come up, and the race directors very quickly offered all of the female or the teams, they offered us a male steersperson, which we quickly declined and said, no, thank you. We got this. That was an interesting thing to observe, just the assumption that we wouldn't be able to handle specifically me, because in this particular case, wouldn't be able to handle those conditions. So there's just assumptions around gender that are made all the time. Inaccurate, often.
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things that in the film is Connie talks about being a pre-Title IX girl, and I think that kind of ties in just like the evolution of what people are, the abilities that people have and the opportunities that people have over time to be involved in these things. It's really fascinating to see how the way that they evolve in that way. Cool.
Awesome. So real quick, I'm going to add to that real quick. Is I think one of my favorite things as a coach is when we kind of tie into that Title IX piece and the folks coming out, is that, especially with dragon boating, everyone who comes out is an athlete. You showed up to practice, you're already an athlete, right? You came to practice a second time, already an athlete. Doesn't matter, because that is and so to me, I feel like that is one of the more enjoyable things, is convincing and showing folks who, like Connie talked about, the pre-Title IX, even just beginning of Title IX folks who didn't have access. And then also the folks who, they didn't play ball sports or they didn't run very fast. They were not seen as athletes, but you show up to practice 1-2 times and you're already an athlete, because you're showing up and you're doing the work and you're trying. And there's something about dragon boating that allows that to happen, especially just for all folks who have ever been told they weren't an athlete, because it takes a different it's a different way of doing it. And so I feel like that is one of my favorite things about paddling, is that you're an athlete when you show up.
And one other way to say that, we've had a company team where I work for a long time, 12 years, and I've coached that a lot. And I had, after the second year, maybe, we had a CNA, a certified nursing aide, who was on that team, who had been a former smoker. She's super tatted up, not a lot of life experience, not a lot of education. And she got so psyched on dragon boating. She actually had a giant tattoo of the team name on her shoulder. And she told me, I've never been on a team before. And it's just like, I got you. It's just a profound experience for people who've been shut out for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah, big time. And I think, like a lot of people might look at it from the outside and think, oh, these are a bunch of hardcore, oh, I could never do that. I mean, I know that I've had that conversation with a lot of people, and I feel like the sport goes beyond just the physical requirements and the training that we do. it really is like a spiritual and such an inspirational thing, you know, that to be a part of a team and to see that you can progress in that way as a person, like it really brings so much to people's spirit, I think. Yeah, it like goes beyond just like the physical training of it all. So that's kind of, I mean, that to me, that's what, you know, inspired me to make this film. I just felt like there was such a great message in it for, you know, for women, for all ages of people, you know, all different, I mean, you know, we train people with, like, one of our strongest athletes has MS, and, you know, training through those kinds of like challenges, all kinds of hip replacement stuff and shoulder replacement, and, you know, everybody's in it together, and, you know, we all kind of make that boat move as a group. So it's a really incredible experience.
And I want to thank you for making the film. I think it's a beautiful tribute to something we love so much. Thank
you. Yeah, I'm really happy that I was able to do it, and it, you know, it was such a special time. Like, and I recognized that right away when I came into the group. That, you know, there was something really amazing happening with that group, and the journey that we were on together. I was just really inspired by it, and I, you know, just thought it was an amazing story to tell to the world. So, oh, Bren has to get to practice. Okay.
Yeah,
And
go.
and I'm going to say, jump on with Carol and say thank you so much, Austyn, for the opportunity, and thank you, Diane, for allowing us to talk about it. As you can see, it's not hard for us to start and just rock and roll for a long time about dragon boating, as we just love it so much. But thank you all, and thanks for honoring Austyn's film. It certainly is deserving. So thank you very much. And Austyn, thanks for letting me be part of this.
Of course. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Love you guys.
All right.
Love you back.
Good luck with the festival.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you guys.
Bye.
All right.